The map of the world is a lot stranger than you think it is, especially this map. You've probably seen it a lot in classrooms or office buildings, but this map is extremely, very badly wrong. Everything is bigger in Texas, but what is Texas itself bigger than? Moving the borders over to Europe, the answer may surprise you. Texas is much bigger than Spain and Portugal put together, and is also even bigger than France. But Texas is only the second biggest US state behind Alaska, which seems absolutely gargantuan at the top of our map. But while Alaska is large, it isn't that large. Taken down to the US mainland, it compares like this, and taken to Europe, it looks like this. And while we're here in Europe, let's take the time to understand how much bigger Europe seems than what it actually should be. Let's start by taking France and moving it down to Africa to get our first glimpse at this. The United Kingdom seems pretty large as well, but let's take India and move it over to see just how small it really is. The United Kingdom is actually smaller than quite a lot of places in the world that you might not expect. Places like Japan, the Philippines, Sumatra, Madagascar, and New Zealand. Next door to New Zealand is Australia, and the UK looks so small just off the east coast in comparison. And Australia, in fact, is much bigger than most people believe it to be. It can be placed to cover almost the entire continental US. Interestingly, the combination of the following countries will not cover that same area: Portugal, the Netherlands, Estonia, Albania, Hungary, Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Austria, Croatia, Latvia, the Czech Republic, Serbia, Switzerland, Slovakia, Lithuania, Denmark, Ireland, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, the United Kingdom, Italy, Germany, France, Spain, and Norway. And that's not even factoring in big but not too big Alaska to the north. Between Alaska and the United States is Canada, which also seems huge up here. And while Canada is a very large country, it's actually roughly the same size as China, but still looks like a colossus when placed in Europe, where it stretches from east to west to Portugal to Iran and up north into the Barents Sea just above of Russia. Slightly off topic, Japan is another bigger place than most people believe it to be. If Japan were placed off the US East Coast, it would look like this in comparison. But much, much bigger than Japan, and also not often thought about, is Brazil, which is an absolutely massive country. It doesn't really look like it on our map, but when we move it to Australia, we can actually discover that Brazil is much bigger, which makes Brazil larger than one of the world's 7 continents. Brazil is also almost larger than the United States, spans almost all of Europe, but fits rather snugly into Africa. We are about to discover that Africa is a colossal continent that we don't often realize. It can almost fit the entire contiguous United States into just the Sahara Desert, and the continent can also squeeze in China, Western Europe, India, Argentina, Scandinavia, and the UK, and still have some room left over. Russia is another place that looks pretty big at the top of the map, but dropped down next to Africa, she also seems much smaller than what our map was telling us beforehand. While we're still here in Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo used to be a colony of Belgium, but Belgium in comparison looks like this. Finally, we need to look at a few other places on the map to the north and the south. Let's start with Sweden, which looks big, but comparing it to Madagascar again, we see that it actually isn't. Iceland also seems like a large island, but it's actually roughly the same size as Tasmania, just south of Australia. And finally, we have the white elephant in the room of Greenland, which towers like a behemoth at the top of the map. Greenland masquerades as being a continent in her own right, looking bigger than Australia, South America, and being comparable to North America. But in reality, Greenland is much, much smaller compared to Australia, South America, and North America. Antarctica, much bigger than Australia. It can stretch all the way from Kiev to Uganda, and incredibly, can be placed between the southernmost tip of Texas in the United States and stretch all the way into the northernmost islands of Canada. There are many more examples like this, but you've probably understood the point by now. The world is both a bigger place and a smaller place than you previously thought it to be.
Hello and welcome to Tricks of the Astray channel. Today is the 23rd of May 2018, and today's video we're taking a look at someone who's very popular in the British media by the name of Graham Norton, and we're also looking at a golf legend in the history of golf, especially in the United States, by the name of Jack Nicklaus. So those are the two people we're going to be featuring on today's show. And if you looked at the title of the show today, or the video rather, it's still part of the continuing series that we started, which is called The Real Presidents, and this happens to be the part number 3. So if you're watching this part number 3, for all intents and purposes, we believe that you have watched the part 1 and part 2, because we're about the whole series of The Real Presidents is about to make you understand the history of the world, especially from the American point of view, which is being used by the Vatican to run our world today. So if it's the first time on our channel, I'd like to welcome you. But before you can continue on with this particular video, I'd like that you should go watch the primer video first, because without watching the primer video, a lot of the things that we're saying is not going to make any sense to you at all. The primer video is the most important video that you have to watch on this channel, because it's going to lay a basic foundation so you can understand whatever video that you're picking up to watch, and you can understand the history behind what we're saying so far. So if it's your first time on our channel and you're a new subscriber, let me point you to the primer video first. The primer video will be the oldest video on this channel. It's called Primer, as you can see right here. It actually has a playlist on the channel, and that playlist contains three other videos, especially the Primer 2, the Theory of Surrogates, and the Theory of Surrogates 2, which we advise that you should watch so you can have a firm understanding of the whole point of mutilating children, taking them from very young, tender ages, which the Vatican does, and using these children to become, or to make them products rather, to use to run our world. So with any video that you watch on this particular channel, if you're a new subscriber, there's always a link in the description section. That link is going to take you to a document. When you click on it, it's going to take you to a document. The document is going to be called Male versus Female Visual Differences. We suggest that you download this document and you keep it for yourself and you study it so you could know the visual differences between male and female, including the primary and secondary female and male characteristics. If we lived in a perfect world, this document would be all that you need to understand, or when you study it, the female and male primary and secondary male characteristics would line up. But we do not live in a perfect world. What do I mean that we do not live in a perfect world? Our foods are poison. That means everything that we take into a system, into our bodies, from food, water, drinks, the air we breathe, the clothes we wear, are all full of poisons. And these poisons are changing the female and male secondary characteristics such that they do not line up with the way they're supposed to. So for example, a female can have a very deep voice, like a man's voice. A female can have very broad shoulders. A female can have, grow some sort of facial hair. She can grow some chest hair. She can grow some Adam's apple, and she might look masculine, but the skeletal structure is always going to remain feminine. But the secondary female characteristics may not line up. Same goes with the male. You find out there are some males who look very, very effeminate. They speak with very small voices, like a female does. They don't have any facial hair, no Adam's apples. And it's because of all the hormones that the Vatican is feeding us day in and night, the albino Vatican, to make us weak so they can control us. All right. So in that scenario, this document would at least show you the male and female secondary characteristics such that you would know it for yourself. But when you're about to figure out someone's gender, if you're interested in figuring out the gender of someone, what you should have to look at is the primary skeletal, or the primary characteristics, which happens to be the skeletal structure, which we always base all our transvestigations on, because the skeleton can never change. Even though the secondary female and male characteristics can change by maybe plastic surgery, if someone is trying to mutilate themselves into believing that they can be a gender different from the gender that we're born with, or from the hormones that we've been fed and then all the poisons that we'll be fed all through our lives, that can change all those features. But nothing can change the skeletal structure, because that is the primary foundation on which everything else is built. So if the skeletal structure is tampered with, the person is going to end up dead. So nothing can change the skeletal structure. Once that sex has been determined at conception, nothing can change the skeletal structure. The skeletal structure of a female will always remain the skeletal structure of a female to the day she dies. The skeletal structure of a male will always remain the skeletal structure of a male till the day he dies, and nothing can change that. So that's why we base all our transvestigations, as we call it, on the primary difference, which happens to be the skeletal structure. So if you come up on a channel and you try to figure out if someone is a transgender by saying the person has all the secondary male or female characteristics of, say, let's say long arms, Adam's apple, facial hair, square jawlines, ring index fingers or long index fingers, Adonis bells, Adam's apple, on our channel we're going to block you, because that means you're slandering without proof. You have to base your transvestigation based on the primary difference between male and females, which happens to be the skeletal structure, because a woman's skeletal structure is designed to give birth, and because of that, a female is going to have hips below her crotch, an arch in her back, a pelvis is tilted forward, and a wide pubic arch. That is what differentiates the sexes, is that one sex is designed to give birth and the other is not. So since we're already neck deep in transvestigation and we're going to be taking a look at the two people we told you about, we happens to be Jack Nicholas and Graham Norton. Let's just dive deep into this document and just go over the little bit details so we can do that. So here's a female to the left of her screen. She has an arch on her back. And why does female have an arch on her back? Is because the pelvis of a female is tilted forward so that a baby can stay inside the womb for the 9 months of conception that a baby has to go through before she's born into this world. The arch is also extra support for the weight of carrying children, such that the weight of pregnancy is distributed across the female's body without the female having any problems working and hurting herself or her baby. So depending on where you draw the arch from, if you draw it from below the shoulder blades, it's going to form a deep C arch in the back of a female. If you draw it from high above the shoulder blades, the back of the female is going to be shaped like an S, as you can see here. Now with males don't have any arch in their back because their pelvis is not tilted forward. Males have a straight pelvis. If the back of a man wants to arch, it's going to arch outwards, as you can see here, in the shape of a D or a P, but straight back into the pelvis. All right. So I want you guys to always remember those two letters. The back of a man is shaped like a D, a P, and is going to be straight into the pelvis with no arch. That of a female is going to be shaped like an S or a C, and there's going to be an arch before it gets into the pelvis. It doesn't matter what size the female comes in, and a female's back will always arch much more than of a man. As you can see right here is a female kneeling down, and as you can see that deep C arch in the back because the pelvis is tilted forward. So that's why females have a much more flexible back than that of a man, because of that tilted pelvis and the deep C arch in the back. So the size of a female doesn't matter as well. It doesn't matter if she's big, tall, or small, tiny, what's the right word, very short. It really doesn't matter. Size does not matter when it comes to the females. Females will always have an arch in her back. As you can see here, there's a big female to the left of the screen. She has an arch in the back and the pelvis is tilted forward. A small female to the right of the screen, arch in the back and the pelvis is tilted forward. It doesn't matter if the female's got muscles, she's working out in the gym, is on a ton of steroids, is a working drug pharmacy. There's always going to be an arch in a female's back. As you can see here, there's a very muscular female. She still has an arch in the back. Another muscular female right here, arch in the back. So nothing can change the skeletal structure once it's determined at conception. So let's go play one of the most defining features in the female skeletal structure, which will always show you that you've been looking at a woman all along, which happens to be the hips of a female, which is designed for childbirth. And that's why it's below the crotch. So let's go there. So as you can see here, you're looking at the screen, you're looking at what we call a regular female. When we say regular female or normal female, that means the way a female body is supposed to be shaped under normal circumstances. That means the way we think a female should be. With regular or normal females, a female's hips are always going to be wider than her shoulders. Now, that does not mean that there are females who have wider shoulders than their hips. It does not make them less of a woman. There are still women. The reason is the location of the female hip is below the crotch. That's what makes you a woman. Having hips below the crotch. Okay, so I want you guys to remember that. So with regular females and with every female, you will start noticing that when you, if you're a female, you start noticing that from underneath your elbows you start getting wider. Your pelvis starts, or your body starts getting wider, and the widest point will always be the hips, which is below the crotch. The hips are below the crotch so they can be out of the way so that a female can give birth, and there should be enough space in the pelvic region for a baby to stay there for the 9 months of conception that a baby has to go through before he or she is born into this world. So if you get on some most channels, they're going to give you some ridiculous facts of saying that the shoulder to hip ratio determines if you're male or female. There's no such thing as shoulder to hip ratio, because females can have their shoulders and even their waist wider than their hips. That does not make them not to be a female. The location of the hip is what determines if you're male or female, because for males, the hip location is above the crotch. For females, it's below the crotch, as you see right here. So in this particular example, this is an example taken and measuring the hips of a female when a female is trying to fit into clothes, or how female clothes are sewn all around the world so that they can fit no matter where they're shipped to. So in this example, you will see right here that this tape is going to go around to measure this female's hips, which happens to be the widest portion in a female usually. And as you can see right here, the tape goes round, and this is below the crotch. Okay? So that's why a female will have an hourglass figure, because her hips are below the crotch. And secondly, because the pelvis of a female has a wider pubic arch. A pubic arch is the space in between your thighs, all right? And for females, it is wider so that a baby can come out of the womb when he or she is due. All right, so because of that wide pubic arch, and for females it's usually 120 degrees or more. All right, everything inside the pelvis of a female is now made farther apart because of the wider pubic arch. So that's why the hips are farther apart in the body of a female. With males, males have a 90-degree pubic arch or less, and that's why a man will not have wide hips, because he has a narrow pubic arch. Okay, so the location of the female hip is below the crotch, and this is the reason why females have an acute Q angle that makes them have an hourglass figure, because the hips are below the crotch and they're farther apart in the body. So the Q angle of a female is very, very acute, and the Q angle is the angle between the hip right here and the knee. For males, the Q angle will start above the crotch. For females, it will be below the crotch. So this female, I'm going to turn around so you can see from the back where the location of her hip is from the back. And as you can see right here, it's always going to be slightly above the bum line, but below the crotch. If this person was a male, this hip location would be farther up, or farther away from this bum line. So if you're looking at somebody, all right, from the back especially, and you see that the Q angle is farther up, all right, away from this bum line, but the hips look wide enough to be female, you have to understand that person is a male, has gone through some sort of mutilation and some butt surgery, but they can't change the location of the hips because it is always going to be above the crotch for every male. No matter what the male does, tries to take some sort of hormonal drugs to gain some fat in the butt area like a female should, but regardless, the hips of that male is still going to be above the crotch. So I always say this: if you're trying to figure out if someone is male or female, and you're doing a transvestigation, and you're walking to confusion, and you're having maybe some sort of cognitive dissonance, try to see if you can find a picture of the person from the back, because once you see the picture of the person from the back, you're going to know exactly that this is either male or female, because it always shows much more the acute Q angle of the female, especially from the back. So let's continue with the transvestigation of Jack Nicklaus and Graham Norton. So first of all, let's read the Wikipedia page on Jack Nicklaus just to see who Jack Nicklaus is. Jack Nicklaus was born, Jack William Nicklaus, born January 21st, 1940, nicknamed the Golden Bear, is a retired American professional golfer. Many observers regard him as the greatest golfer of all time. So, like we've said before, the Vatican is so much interested in constructing a false sense of history because they want us to believe in the great albino hoax, all right? So they're creating all this, constructed people and making them to be the greatest of all time, in which they fabricate the sport, they fabricate the winnings, they fabricate the medals just to make their great white albino hopes to always win and to give us an idea that white supremacy, as they call it, is actually the way man is supposed to be. All right? This is all the devil's design to make you lose, let's say, lose any sort of, let's say, some sort of, what's the right word to put here? Lose any sort of like credibility and lose any sort of, let's say, trust in black woolly head people, as we should call it, woolly head people, so that by the time you see Yehoshua, you will deny him to be God because he is not of pale skin and straight hair. This is all the devil's design, okay? But nevertheless, let's take a look. Let's read on and talk about, because Jack Nicklaus is regarded as the greatest golfer of all time, and as it says here that during a span of more than 25 years, he won a record 18 career major championships while producing 19 second place and 9 third place finishes. Nicklaus focused on the major championships, Masters Tournament, US Open Championship, and PGA Championship, and played a selective shuttle of regular PGA Tour events, yet still finished with 73 victories, third on all-time list behind Sam Snead and Tiger Woods. So this is who we are featuring on this particular video today. And the next person we are featuring is Graham Norton. All right, Graham Norton is very, very popular, I think, in the British media. And I want to thank that subscriber of ours who brought this to attention. I don't quite remember your name at this point in time. If your name is Chris, I want to thank you. If I've mistaken the name, you know who you are, but all the same, we thank you once again. So it says here, Graham William Walker, professionally known as Graham Norton, is an Irish television and radio presenter, comedian, actor, and writer based in the United Kingdom. He's 5-time BAFTA TV award winner for his comedy chat show, The Graham Norton Show, and 8-time BAFTA award winner overall, originally shown on BBC Two before moving to the other slots on BBC One. It succeeded Friday Night with Jonathan Ross in BBC's once prestigious late Friday evening slot in 2010. So this is who we're featuring on today's show. So let's move on to the Transvestigation, because we have a few things that we want to talk about, which is related to making you understand your history of your world a little bit more. So let's do that. So we take off with Graham Norton right here. As you can see, Graham Norton has an acute Q angle that's below the crotch, and a very, very wide hips, as you can see right here. Let me see if I can blow this picture up as much as I can so you guys can take a good look at that. As you can see, this Q angle is below the crotch because Graham Norton is 100% female and not a man. So that's why you can make, this is a perfect example of why you can make your assessment of someone's gender based on the secondary male or female characteristics, because all that can be changed through surgery, drugs, and hormones. Because if you're looking at Graham Norton right here and seeing this square jawline that you see on his face, right, you would say you've been looking at a male, because even Graham Norton has facial hair, has male facial hair. So you would be very, very deceived, because like I've said before, we are fed a constant dosage of drugs to make us weak and hormones to make us weak, so that the elite can control us, the albino elite. If you hear me say that for the very first time and you hear me mention the word albino instead of white, you have to understand this. Anybody with straight hair in this world is an albino, because the word comes from the Latin word albus, which means a lack of melanin. So if you say you're white, white is not a designation for a color, because there is nobody that is white in this world, white as a white sheet and piece of paper. There's no such thing, because you have to also understand that white is an absence of all color. White is an absence of all color. It's not a designation for color. The word white, when used with a human being, is from the Latin word albus, which means a lack of melanin. So when you say you're white, what you're saying in essence is that you're an albino. And that goes with anybody who has straight hair. It doesn't matter what color of skin the person has, if the person can tan or not, as long as the hair is straight, you're an albino, because that is how albinism comes by. It always shows up in the hair. When you get a book, you get into that fine details to understand everything that we're saying. We're going to be leaving all the information that you need to get the book so you can have a deep understanding. You can also watch the playlist on the channel called The Myth of Whiteness. It's a 15-part series. It will do you a whole world of good to watch it and just listen for a minute so you can understand this better. So let's go move on with the transvestigation of Graham Norton right here. And here's Graham Norton, who's actually this is how the Vatican makes a mockery of us. First of all, they take this girl, because I'm very sure Graham Norton was taken when she was a baby. They mutilate her into a male, all right? And then they make her to dress up in drag to make a mockery of us so that we wouldn't know that Graham Norton is actually female. Because you can see from the way that Graham Norton fills out this clothes, he fills it out like a female would. All right. This is Graham Norton, a mutilated female, filling out into a female gown. And this was actually for a particular, I think, a Hollywood or Broadway production that they made. We'll show you some more pictures of Graham Norton so you can actually see that this hourglass figures. You see the long butt of a female, because females have a longer butt. The butt of a female starts way high in the torso of her body, which is always going to be above her navel. That's where the female butt starts, and it goes all the way down to her hips, which is always going to be below her crotch. And the butt of a female takes 1/2 the torso length of her body. All right, half of it. Half of the female is all butt. Okay, and that's what Graham Norton is exhibiting here, because she is 100% female, not a man in any way. Here's another picture of Graham Norton, and you can see that female long butt starts showing, because all this from this area all the way down is the female butt. And that's how Graham Norton is sitting right there, looking like a female, because she is a female. You can see how round and thick the thighs are, because Graham Norton is 100% woman and not a man, just masquerading around as one. Here's Graham Norton again. As you can see that she fills out this cloth, because these are all her hips. Look at that. Humongous hips, because Graham Norton is 100% female. All right, she fills out the clothes pretty well, and you can see this acute Q angle is below the crotch, because the crotch will be right around here, and this is the acute Q angle below it, because Graham Norton is 100% woman and not a man in any way. This is just a mockery, you know, the Vatican laughing right in front of her faces in trying to make you believe that Graham Norton is actually a man, actually dressed out in drag like a female, when she's actually a female and not in drag. Okay, here's Graham Norton again. As you can see, the long butt of a female and how tilted the pelvis is all the way down, because Graham Norton is 100% female. She would have been a very pretty lady if the Vatican had let her live, but they use her as a product to control our reality. A lot of people don't understand the reason for transgenders. The reason for transgenders is, first of all, to create people of a very narrow mindset who have a narrow view of the world, so that whatsoever they tell you about this world, you're going to believe it as the truth, because they're going to say it from the narrow mindset in which they've been groomed in. That's number one reason for transgenders. The second reason for the transgenders is that they serve as temple priests and priestesses and temple prostitutes. So a lot of the celebrities that you see on TV, I don't want to go into any names, are high-class prostitutes, temple prostitutes, because the name of the Pope is the Pontifex Maximus. That's the name of the Pope. The title is Pontifex Maximus. Now what does Pontifex Maximus mean? Pontifex Maximus means the chief priest. So the Pope is the chief of all pagan priests in this world. And he also goes by the name, the substitute for Christ, the vicar of Christ. So this is what all these people, as you see in celebrities, really are. There are priests or priestesses or high degree temple prostitutes serving in different temples around the world, in which the Pope is the chief priest of all those pagan temples. When you get a book, we get into that fine details. And people, I just want to make you understand, we do not enjoy making long videos. That's why we put all this information in the book for you so that you can get it. Because once you get the book, there's no need for all this video because you have all the information that you need in the book. Every question that you could possibly think of is in the book, and we answer it thoroughly so you can understand it. So please get the book, right? Save for it. If you don't have the money, save towards it. I mean, like I've said, a lot of us have spent so much money on so many things and have maybe bought a lot of books which did not show you anything. A book is the truth. We're not trying to make minds word about it. We're not bragging about it. We are still saying the truth because we're saying this with all humility and simplicity, that a book is the next best thing after the Bible, which happens to be your Geneva Bible and your King James Bible. So let's continue on with the Transvestigation of Graham Norton right here. Here's Graham Norton again walking the dogs. You can see this acute Q angle is still below the crotch because Graham Norton is 100% female and not a man in any way. Here's another picture of Graham Norton. As you can see, those thick thighs of a female show up here because Graham Norton is 100% female, and you can tell from the way that she's crossing her legs, because females usually cross their legs at a very acute angle inside the thigh, unlike males, which will cross it at a very, let's say much more, let's say shallow angle towards the calves and the knees. But the way Graham Norton is sitting here, you can tell that this is actually a female crossing her legs. Next picture on Graham Norton again, still walking the dogs. You can see those curvaceous hourglass figure and acute Q angle below the crotch because Graham Norton is 100% female and not a man in any way. Here's another picture of Graham Norton, still acute Q angle below the crotch. Another picture of Graham Norton, and Graham Norton, it parades around as a gay male. A lot of the homosexuality which we see on TV or which is broadcast worldwide is actually fabricated. Most of these couples are heterosexual, because Graham Norton here will tell you that he's a gay male, but he's not really. It's constructed because the Vatican likes constructing this kind of things to make us actually believe in homosexuality, which is a fabrication, because the nature of man does not allow for homosexuality, but they want to force it down our throats so we believe that it's a norm. Because looking at this, one of the, I think, a so-called boyfriends of Graham Norton, who goes around parading herself as a gay male. But judging by the hips and this curvature right here of this particular person, who happens to be Trevor Patterson, an ex-boyfriend or so of Graham Norton, this looks like two females right here. All right, they looks like two females just based on the curvature of Trevor Patterson here. So let's go to some other pictures of Graham Norton. Here's Graham Norton again, acute Q angle still below the crotch because Graham Norton is a female all day and not a man in any way. Another picture of Graham Norton. I think that's the last picture we have on Graham Norton. So let's switch gears now and move over to Jack Nicklaus, so we can continue on and talk about some few things which you have to talk about on this particular series of called The Real Presidents Part number 3. So let's go. So here is Jack Nicklaus, the greatest golfer of all time in the history of mankind, according to our albino elites in the Vatican who run our world. As you can see here, Jack Nicklaus has an acute Q angle below the crotch because Jack Nicklaus is a female and not a man in any way. As you can see right here, you can tell the difference between how a male walks and a female walks, because you can see right here the the Q angle for a male right here, because this person is male. You can see it's above the crotch. The Q angle starts high above the crotch, as you can see here. That's his crotch. It starts right here. Let me see if I can blow this up so you guys can see that. Let me blow this up. My mouse has been messing up for the past couple of days, and I just don't know why. So right here you can see we have this acute Q angle, this angle for a male which starts above the crotch, and acute Q angle here for a female which is below the crotch. So I mean, everything the way God designs is just wonderful. It makes a lot of sense when you start noticing that even in our own nature, it shows how God designed the structure of the family to be the man above and the female below. Because everything in a man is above and everything for a female is below. Wow, it's wonderful. Let's go. Another picture of here of Jack Nicklaus, and you can see this acute Q angle is below the crotch, and the other person to the right also seems to have this acute Q angle below the crotch. So this should be two females. I don't know who this is in the picture, but we're not interested for now. We're interested just in Jack Nicklaus, which has this curvaceous hourglass figure, because Jack Nicklaus is 100% female. The greatest golfer of all time is 100% woman and not a man anyway. So that means all the golfing accolades that he's won has been fabricated by the albino Vatican, which keeps us giving us false histories for us to live our lives off. So let's go to another picture of Jack Nicklaus. You can see clear as night and day. If you wanted to end the transvestigation right here on Jack Nicklaus, you would see that the acute Q angle is below the crotch hourglass figure, because Jack Nicklaus is 100% female. Another picture of Jack Nicklaus right here. You can still see this acute Q angle is below the crotch hourglass figure, because Jack Nicklaus is 100% female and not a man. Here's another picture of Jack Nicklaus right here. Acute Q angle is still below the crotch all day, because Jack Nicklaus is 100% female. Jack Nicklaus again swinging. Acute Q angle is below the crotch. Jack Nicklaus is 100% female. Okay. And here's Jack Nicklaus in his older age with Roger Federer. So that's why you can't make any role models of anybody you see on TV. They are all paid, deceived lions, trained from childhood to be in the position they are, so they can be used to run your world. So Roger Federer would not just have happened to be one of the greatest tennis players of all times by accident. He was, rather, because it's not a she, rather, he was put there by the Vatican. And here is Roger Federer with Jack Nicklaus. If Roger Federer was interested in telling you the truth, to be the champion that you want him to be, he should have told you that Jack Nicklaus right here is 100% female. But he never said a word, because he's also a stooge of the Vatican. And here is another favorite champion that a lot of people love, the great Muhammad Ali, considered the greatest boxer of all time. If Muhammad Ali was interested in telling the truth, like he was claiming all through his boxing days era, that he was telling you the truth, that he was telling the truth in everything he did, he should have told you that Jack Nicklaus right here was a woman. But Muhammad Ali never whispered a word. So any role models you have in this particular world, in this world, are all of the devil. They are all false. That's just the truth. Make no role models of anybody. Okay? Make no role models of anybody. Nobody should be your role model. Alright? So don't follow anybody. Don't follow us blindly. Always think with your brain. Listen to what you hear. Okay? Make no role models of anybody. Alright, here is Jack Nicklaus again with another golfer, but you can still see this acute angle is below the crotch, because Jack Nicklaus is 100% female and not a man in any way. I think that's the end of the picture for Jack Nicklaus. So let's switch out and talk about what we wanted to talk about in this Real Presidents part number 3. We just wanted to get the transvestigation out of the way for the narrow-minded people who are only interested in transgenders, who only watch for the transgenders and never listen to any other word. I wish I could get them out of this channel, because a channel is dedicated to the whole truth, so you can have a clear understanding and picture of the whole truth, and not just be focused on the flimsy transgenders, which are not the main people that you should be looking after. Because you have to understand something. The transgenders are the fruits of a tree. Alright? If you want to make sure, alright, that the tree does not keep producing bad fruits, you don't go plucking off the bad fruits and leave the tree to keep growing, because it will still keep on producing bad fruits. So if a tree is bad, what do? You cut it down from the roots. But you have narrow-minded people here only focus on transgenders. The only thing they're interested in is in transgenders. And I'm sorry for them, because at the end of the day, I'm sorry to say this, they're going to wake up somewhere that they never thought they would be. And they would say, wow, I should never have focused on transgenders. Because I keep telling people this every time on the videos, okay? Don't get lost in the transgenders. Don't get lost in the Vatican. Don't get lost in the myth of white supremacy. Don't get lost in the fact that we are all black. Don't get lost in the fact that blacks are degraded all around the world. Because all this is a deception designed for you to focus your energy on the wrong things. This whole deception is designed for your soul. It's trying to make you choose a side. It's all designed to harvest your soul, because Satan wants to harvest your soul and God wants to harvest your soul as well. So in all of this deception is supposed to lead you astray into the wrong place, so you become a seed of the devil or a seed of God. So don't get lost in all of this, because a lot of people focus on this, and some people will watch this video and stop right here, and that's all what they're gonna get. But they're not gonna understand, they're not gonna be able to make their minds understand what they're going on, so they can make the right choices, so they don't fall for the deception that's going on in our world. Focus on the tree, not on the fruits. Get your focus off on the evil tree, which happens to the Vatican, so you can see the good tree, the tree of life, which God wants you to see. All right, so let's move on and talk about what we want to talk about on this particular edition of the Real Presidents part number 3. So before we continue, we just want to let you know that we do not know how long this channel is going to be up, and as much as we love videos, making videos, there's lots of things that we can't say in the videos, and there's no amount of videos that we can make that's going to cover everything that we intend to tell you, so you get the whole picture of what's going on in your world, so you can make that informed decision for your soul. So that's why we put all this information in the book, because we do not know how long this channel is going to be up. And we have put the information on how to get the book on our screen, our contact information and phone number as well. The phone number can only receive text. If you call, you're not going to get an answer, because we can't answer all the calls of everybody who's going to be calling in. So the best way to reach us is through email first. If you don't get a response from the email, then send us a text and we'll respond to you. So the Vatican is busy trying to shut us down, because they've landed several strikes on accounts, and we do not know how long this channel is going to be up. So in your own best interest, we design all this information and put it inside a book for you. The price of a book is not our own doing, but regardless, we stand by our word that it's going to be worth every single penny that you've ever had your whole entire life. I'm not just talking about the money you spend on a book. It's going to be worth every single penny that you spent right from the day that you were born till now. So we suggest that you get the book, because as all the strikes you can see on account is trying to make sure that they have a valid way of shutting us down, so that they can tell you guys that we were doing so many bad things, and that's why the channel had to go down, because the Vatican owns YouTube, and YouTube is just here to censor the information that a lot of people have, so that they can control the information, so that people will not know who the Vatican really is and what they're up to. So the first strike, the London account, was for the Selena Q video, in which we're trying to make the whole world understand that Selena Q is not the gender that she claimed, that Selena Q was actually a man and deceived the whole Hispanic world with his music. If you're interested in watching that Selena Q video, please look for the Bono video on the channel, and it will give you instructions on how to watch it. And the other strike they put on account was for the real gender, not transgender or transsexual, part number 4. And they said on this particular violation that we were harassing and bullying people. I wonder how you harass and bully someone by just making a video, and the video is just showing that the people that a lot of people are slandering are actually the gender they claim, and they're not. But we know the reason why they did that, because in that particular real gender, not transgender, transsexual number 4 series that we had, we made a mention that the government set up a hoax, which happened to be the Las Vegas shootings, I think sometime last year or early this year, sometime last year. I think it was in October last year. to make sure that they can have some sort of gun control, because the Vatican wants to take all the guns away from the people and take away their right of the Second Amendment, which was created by the woolly-haired presidents. We started running the United States until Abraham Lincoln, which happens to be the last black president that was overthrown during the Civil War. We're going to talk about that on this particular video as well. So that's why the Vatican put a strike on account, because we tried to make the public understand that it's a hoax, to make sure that they can pass some sort of a gun law that takes the right of people to put a bump stock on an automatic rifle and turn it into a semi-automatic rifle. So that was the whole idea and why they shut that particular video down. And then they lied to us and tell us that it was because we were harassing and bullying people, instead of the truth, which they know why they had to shut that video down, because we're trying to inform the public of what's going on with the Vatican, who's running the United States, the Senate, and the President. So that's that. So please get a book. It's very important that you get a book, because the channel may go off at any point in time. You might wake up one morning and it's gone. But when you have your book, when you've got the book, you have this information with you day and night, and you can pass it on to your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, real history, because we believe the book is the only real history that we have left, besides the Bible, the Geneva Bible, and the King James Bible. That's what we believe, because we tie all that history in together, so you understand what's going on with your world. So let's continue on and talk about what we want to talk about on the Real Presidents part number 3. Let's go. So on the Real Presidents part number 3, we want to make the public understand a little bit of history and what was going on. If you noticed, during the 18th century, the late part of the 18th century into the 19th century, let's say into the late part of the 19th century, the whole world was embroiled in so many wars. It is considered one of the most tumultuous times of human history during this 100 years from 1861, and we pick up this particular history with the American Civil War, which started in 1861. From 1861 down, I think, until I would say the 1960s. Okay, there was a war, a mini war, a major war in one part of the world or the other. It doesn't matter if it was on the continent of Africa. It doesn't matter if it was on the continent of Asia. It doesn't matter if it was on the continent of North and South America, or the so-called continent of Europe. People, you have to understand that Europe was always a part of Africa. You have to understand that. So when you take a look at the map of, let's say, Africa right here, as you look at it on my screen, all this part here that's called Europe right here is still a part of Africa. Because you can see right here, the reason why a lot of people get sucked into the idea of actually believing that Europe is not a part of Africa is because of the Mediterranean Sea, which they've made so large right here in the map. But the Mediterranean Sea is not this big. It's a very small sea. At the most, it takes you, if you're flying across it, it takes you at the most less than 45 minutes to cross the whole Mediterranean Sea. Less than 45 minutes if you're flying across it. And you have to understand that the Gibraltar Strait right here, which is the small strait which separates Spain from Morocco, is only 7 miles long. So that means if you're driving in a car, you'll be driving from Africa into Spain under 8 minutes. All right? So Europe was never called Europe until the albino elite from Asia took over Europe and called it Europe. It was never the Romans, the last empire, the woolly head, the last black empire, which was black with woolly hair, never called it Europe. It was never a part of anywhere but a part of Africa. And also, you also have to understand that Arabia right here, Saudi Arabia, is also a part of Africa. It was never called the Middle East. All this area right here up to Turkey, all the way down here, Europe, all the rest of Europe right here, all the way down to Turkey, and all the way down to Iran right here. All this was still a part of Africa. All right. The Arabians, the so-called Arabians, are from Africa. They were from the natives of Sudan and South Sudan that you see right here. This was the area that the Arabs ruled, the children of Ishmael according to the Bible. And they were all black with woolly hair. When you get a book, you will get all this fine information. But there's a reason why we're telling you all of this. So we started off by telling you that from 1861 to the late 1900s, that the whole world was embroiled in some war, one way or the other, whether a minor war or a major war like the world wars. And then there was a lot of coups going on around the world, military takeovers, because if you know, during that time of history, there was a lot of military coups around the world taking over. All right. So why was all this happening during this 100-year period? To understand this story, we need to understand one thing and one thing first. Every civilization that has run this world has always come from Africa. I want you to remember that right here and now. Every civilization, okay, that has run this world has always been African. So when a lot of people look down on Africa, there's a reason for it. Because the albino elite don't want you to know that history. Because when Africans who have always ran this world know that history, when the black people know that history, the albino elite can no longer have a wall grasp on power. The reason why every black person in this world is suffering because every civilization that has run this world has always been black and has always been African. So it doesn't matter if the name is Babylon. It's Babylon. You probably heard of Babylon before, and they usually tell you that Babylon was in the area of Turkey. That is false. Babylon has always been in Africa. When you get a book, you get that understanding. So every civilization that has run this world has always been African. The Egyptians were in Africa. You've probably heard of the Arabians and the Persians, right? The Persians were Africans. All right? The Persians came from the tribe or from the lineage of the Arabs, which were always in Africa. The children of Ishmael were always in Africa, and they always occupied the area of Sudan and South Sudan right here. So Arabians have always been black with wool here. So the Persians who ruled the world, all right, and the Assyrians were all grandchildren of Ishmael from Africa. How about the Greeks? The Greeks is right here, like we've said before. Now, let's show you a map in which we've drained away all the water of the Mediterranean. It's just an example to make you understand that all the landmass of Europe and Africa is one landmass and not two. So let me show you that. So here is an example of the Mediterranean Sea drained out, all right, to make you understand that all this landmass is one landmass and they're all Africans. So the so-called Greeks, which ran the world, in which the New Testament of the Bible was written in the Greek language, were all Africans. How about the Romans, which ran the world for a particular time? Rome right here shares almost the same borders with the so-called continent which they describe as Africa today. They were black, woolly-haired people. Okay? So every civilization in this world, Every civilization that has run this world has always been African. So this is the first time in history in which a different continent is trying to rule the world, which happens to be Asians. Okay? So everybody that you see in Europe today who call themselves Europeans, everybody that you see around the world, okay, who have some of straight hair and pale skin are all Asian or have Asiatic blood. They're all Asians. And they came from Asia. And most especially from the area that is called Mongolia today. Why Mongolia? Because when the caste system, which was put in place by the black woolly-haired kings of Asia, failed to keep in check the weakly albino people that they were producing, or population that were producing at the time, and this weakly albino population started ganging up against their woolly-haired lords, and Genghis Khan, all right, decided to bring together all the nomadic albino tribes and try to take away power from their woolly-haired kings. When the European kings and the Arabian kings had fought themselves and decimated their population during the Crusades, all these people, wherever they went, wherever they took over, they removed all the woolly-haired people from Asia into Europe. And from there, they went around the world. And the one thing Genghis Khan, all right, told his people, told his generals before he died, was that they should rule the world. That he failed to conquer the whole world because he had conquered a part of Asia. He conquered the whole of Asia, the whole Asian place, and had conquered part of the Arabian place here all the way down, and a little bit of Egypt and Libya, and part of Europe. He told them to conquer the whole world. That is what the albino elites today are doing, because all of them can trace their lineages to Genghis Khan and his generals. So this is the first time in history that an ethnicity from Asia, which now call themselves white, doesn't matter if they're Japanese, it doesn't matter if they're Indian, it doesn't matter what they are all Asians. It's the first time in history that an Asian ethnicity, which is now titled as a race, as they call it, as the white race, is trying to run the world. So how can you be successful in running the world when the majority of the population is 3/4 black? All right? The world has always been almost 4 feet black all throughout history until the 1300s. It's from the 1300s that Genghis Khan, after moving into, all the areas of Asia now with his generals, and started changing the face of black people to pale skin and albino skin, like from pale skin into pale skin and straight hair, like you have, for example, in Mexico right now, in which Mexicans are now have pale skin and straight hair. It's never happened before, because the Mexicans were from the Aztecs, and the Aztecs were always black woolly-haired people. Okay? So this is the first time in history in which a different ethnicity, a different people who are not African are trying to run the world. So how do you do that? You have to recognize, first of all, that every civilization that has always run this world has always been African. So in order for you to remain on top, you have to remove the foundation of all civilizations, which has always been African. So that's the reason why black people all around the world are now a target for white supremacy, because that's the only way the different civilization, which is not African, can try to run the world today. Okay? So that's the understanding that you have to understand first. So let's get back into what we're trying to say. Now, during the late 1800s, from Abraham Lincoln, which we have come to find out based on the evidence that we've provided in the part 1 and part 2 of this series, that Abraham Lincoln and all the presidents that ran the United States of America, which are now labeled white or painted white, were all black woolly-haired people. Okay? Now, when the albino elite from the Vatican, when the albino elite from Asia took over the Vatican and were trying to run the world and conquer the world for Genghis Khan, their generals, because like I've said, everybody that's elite and that is white or albino as we call them can all trace their lineages to Genghis Khan and his generals, which were running rampant through Asia into Europe and to the rest of the world as we see today. Okay? So when they came in and they started ruling things, and they wanted America for themselves, because the people who got to America were all black woolly-haired European kings and queens who were running from their lives from the albino hordes from Asia which has come into Europe. Okay? And these guys all came to North and South America, an example in Christopher Columbus, trying to find new lands for their soles. Alright? And when they did that, the albinos from Asia followed after them and feigned to make peace with these so-called European kings in North and South America after they had taken over a majority part of Europe. Remember, when these guys took over Europe, when the albino Asian hordes took over Europe, they did not take all of it over at one time. They were ruling parts of it until they had mustered enough of the kingdoms around Europe. So for example, when they went into Europe, they did not take Europe all at the same time. They had strongholds, and over a period of time, they gradually accumulated more land masses and more kingdoms like France, and then later on Britain, which was the last empire that crumbled for them to take over the whole of Europe. Okay? So when they came over to the United States of America, they came under the auspices that they were trying to make peace with this already, fleed European kings who now came into North and South America. In order for that peace to ensue, they had to be given colonies. Okay? They had to be given colonies to thrive on, because that's how the peace was supposed to be made. But when the albinos from Asia got the colonies in North America, they renegated on that peace and started, making slavery a mainstay in all these countries of North and South America. So from then on, this now led to a problem, because now the new Vatican wanted the old Vatican. When I say old Vatican here, means the European kings who had fled away from Europe into North America, all right, was the old Vatican. The new Vatican being the albino elites that has now come in and used all the knowledge of those woolly-haired kings to run Europe. And they also said they wanted to make peace with the old Vatican, which had now come into North America. So for example, if you study the history of Virginia, the state of Virginia and Maryland, the reason why it was called Virginia and Maryland was because the old Vatican from Europe, which was made of woolly-haired kings, had now come into America, and they established their own Vatican. That's why they call them the state of Virginia and Maryland, in honor of the Vatican that they had fled from. So when the new Vatican, which was now white, or albinos we call it, were trying to make the old Vatican, which was now in North America, to be under their own control. All right? The woolly head kings or woolly head presidents who now formed the Constitution of the United States of America did not want any part to do with it. They wanted to succeed themselves from that Vatican because they were no longer a part of it. They were the old ones. And that led to the Civil War in America, which decimated all those woolly head kings of the old Vatican, and the new Vatican was now taking over power in North America through that Civil War. Now, after that Civil War ended, the new Vatican now had to go into all the old world and re-establish themselves as the new Vatican, in which all the other kings of like Africa or wherever they were now made to be subject to them. So here is where the story changes. So during that 100-year period, it was the new Vatican fighting for supremacy over the old Vatican that had existed before them in so many places around the world. So that was why during that 100-year period, there were so many coups, and the whole world was embroiled in some war or the other, because it was the new Vatican trying to take over from the old one. Does it make sense? So how did this new Vatican of the albino elites get into Africa so much and controlled Africans? Here is where the story starts. First of all, what they did was go under the auspices that they were now the new Vatican, all right, replacing the old Vatican. So whatsoever you were doing for the old Vatican, that you would now have to also do for the new Vatican. This is how they went into Africa. A lot of the African kings did not buy the idea that the old Vatican, which was run by black woolly-haired European kings, which were a lot of them had business deals with, now had to submit to the new Vatican, which is now pale skin and straight hair. And because of that fact, a lot of the African kings in that time decided to succeed, to have independence. So if you noticed in Africa, there was a time period in which it seems like every African country wanted to be independent. What do you think they were seeking independence from? They were seeking independence away from the new Vatican, because the old Vatican was no longer around, which was ruled by black woolly-haired people. So when this happened, the new Vatican now said, okay, you guys want your independence. We'll give it to you, all right? But already they were doing business deals together. So the new Vatican of the albinos elites decided to create agents in Africa. And how did they create these agents? All right? They needed to control two things to create agents which they could trust. The first control, or the first thing they created, was to make sure that they had a control of the money. Control of the money. Now, money had become very, very important during the time that the old Vatican was doing business. The black woolly head, when I say the old Vatican here, I'm talking about the black woolly head Vatican that existed before. Money had now become a very important commodity. And most of these European kings did money with their own kind of currency. Remember that. The old Vatican was dealing with European money when they were transacting business across the world with, it doesn't matter if they were in Asia, in Africa, in Australia, or in North and South America. They were transacting with their own money, which happened to be in maybe shillings or then European currency or European notes. Okay? So, in order for the new Vatican, which is now made of straight hair and pale skin, to make sure that they still have a stranglehold on power, being that they're the new Vatican, they need to take control of the money, number one, and then also they needed to take control of the militaries of all countries around the world. And how are you going to do that? You need to create agents. And how did they create these agents? They promised so many of the African lords or so many of the kings and queens around the world that the best way to keep the money flowing, to keep the success and the economy that they had, was to make sure that they printed the money, and they would print it cheaper, and so these African kings wouldn't need to spend a whole lot of money, all right, trying to manufacture printing presses for their own currency. So that was the first step. A lot of the agents had this, a lot of the agents agreed to this fabulous idea because men everywhere around the world are greedy. Okay? They agreed to the fabulous idea that the new Vatican would print the money for them because it would be cheaper for them to print and ship it to them for them to use in doing whatsoever transaction that they were doing, instead of trying to create the money themselves. So that was the first step in process in which the new Vatican could now get into every country. They submitted that they would print the money for these countries at a very nice rate. And a lot of the woolly head agents who agreed to this got rich and accepted it. And so all the countries in the world now were in debt because the new Vatican was printing money for them at a cheaper rate and still making them pay for it one way or the other through their agents. So that was the first step. The next step, since they control the money, they can now control the army. And when they control the army, they use a lot of these armies around the world to start coups, to make sure that they took out the guys, the majority of the leadership around the world, which were still tied to the old Vatican, which was made of black woolly haired people. So during this time from 1861 to the late 1900s, that was what was going on around the world. It was the new Vatican taking over power and removing all the people, all right, who were still connected to the old Vatican and were still loyal to them from power. And that's why there were a lot of coups, a lot of wars. Now, one of the reasons, a lot of reasons for the First and Second World War. Now, it's very, very important that you have to understand what happened during the Second World War. We already talked about in one of the videos that the Second World War started firstly in Japan. But why Japan? Because nobody ever knows the answer to that question. When Genghis Khan was taking over Asia and uniting a lot of the albino people and hordes from Asia to take over power from their black woolly haired kings, one of the places that Genghis Khan had a problem taking over was Japan. Go study the history of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan tried to take over Japan like 2 or 3 times and he failed because the albinos in Japan did not agree to Genghis Khan. All right? So Genghis Khan died without taking over Japan. And so when he died, one of the commissions that he gave his generals, that Japan had to be submitted. Over a 200 or 300 year span, that never came to fruition until the Second World War, in which the generals, all right, those people who can trace themselves to the lineage of the generals of Genghis Khan, now did it successfully in the Second World War. That's why that war started first in Japan, because Genghis Khan never took over Japan. All right. So that is a fair history for now. So the next history now that we're going to talk about is this. The only reason why white supremacy or albino supremacists, all right, are able to rule the majority of the population, which happens to be 3/4 black as of today, from the 4/5 of the majority of the population to 3/4 today, is because they are doing so through fear tactics, terrorism tactics. All right. First of all, they make black people all around the world have an under-siege mentality that they are the minority. They say that every day and every night until they actually believe it. Now, the black woolly head agents, the black leadership in the world, is the most stupid, bereft of ideas, very, very greedy leadership that the world has ever seen. Why do I say that? You have to understand that this idea of albino supremacy running the world is based on fear and not truth. And how do they create this fear? They create this fear by making these black agents believe that, first of all, that they are the minority, which they believe, because black leadership all around the world are very, very stupid. They do not think. They can't think for themselves. They just believe what they're told and believe it's true by the propaganda that's being created by the albino elites in the Vatican. They make them believe that they are the minority. First, that black people are a minority. They make them believe in such hoaxes as nuclear weapons. So the black leadership will never ever, get an idea that they are the majority and that nuclear weapons are fakes, are a hoax. Okay? So those are the two things. Now, there was one person who understood this hoax. One black leader who knew of the tricks of the trade that the albino Vatican were playing on the whole world, especially on the black population. He's been a recent leader in recent times. And that black leadership's name, or that black person who came to the knowledge that all these things were a hoax, that the albinos are actually a very, very small people based on the population, that India and China cannot have the same population as Africa, and that Africa is the largest continent in the world and all other continents fit inside it, and that Africa has more than half the world's population. The leader who came to all this knowledge recently was a leader of the South African country, and that leader's name was Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma found out that all the stories that they were told as black leadership, the story of Africans, or a story of black people being a minority population, the story of nuclear weapons is all a hoax. When Jacob Zuma discovered that, he tried to tell the whole African population, especially the leaders, that the so-called albino elite are playing mind games on them. They don't have no nuclear weapons, and that they're a minority of the population. When Jacob Zuma started speaking, he became under attack by the albino elite in the Vatican. So let me show you what Jacob Zuma has gone through, because he was one of those leaders who found out that all these people, all these albino elites were telling them lies, that they have no such power but tricks. Because you have to understand this. A man's mind is the most powerful tool in the world. Why is it so powerful? You know, all through history, it's always been, you have to understand how this world is being run. The world is run by the devil. And the devil only runs the world based on the information that he has. And where does he get his information from? He gets his information from human beings. All through history, the devil has always run the world based on strength, because that's the only information that he had. Because remember, the devil doesn't know anything. All what he knows, he studies from human beings, because human beings are the only people who were created in the image of God and his likeness. What does that mean? Everything God had, he gave it to human beings. So for example, if you're sad because God can be sad. God can be happy. That's why you are happy. God gave man dominion over the whole earth because God has dominion over all things. So whatsoever God had, he gave to human beings. He gave human beings his nature. The angels do not have the nature of God because they are servants. A servant does not have a mind of his own. He only has the mind of his master or whosoever he's serving. It's only a child or a son that can have the mind of his father. So angels have no mind. They can only do what God tells them to do. But God gave man the ability to have his own mind, free will. So all through history, the devil, in trying to run this world, has always been learning about the nature of God from man. So the first thing the devil learned about man was that in order for you to rule this world, you have to be strong. And all through history, it's only strong men that have ruled all the civilizations of the world, from Babylon to Egypt to Greece to the Romans. And every other civilization which you can name, which has always been an African civilization. So later on, the devil discovered one thing else that was even more powerful than strength, a man's physical strength, which is his mind. He found out that if you can control someone's mind, the whole entire physical strength that he has comes to nothing. So that's why everything that's based on this world today by the albino elite is based on mind control. Because if you control a person's mind, all his strength accounts for nothing. It doesn't matter if you're strong as an elephant. As long as your mind is controlled, all that strength will be nothing. So that is what is happening presently in our world, because the albino elites are running a mind game on everybody in the world, and all the strength of the world and all the strength of the so-called black people count for nothing. So Jacob Zuma discovered this, and when he discovered this, he started telling all the other black woolly haired agents that they should not listen. They have nothing to be afraid of the albino or the new Vatican that's running the world. And when he started doing that, he started getting in trouble. The albino elite started setting him up to make sure that he was removed as the president, or he had a very difficult presidency. Let's read up some of the things that Jacob Zuma has gone through. So you can pause the video at any point in time and copy out this link, because we're going to read some of the things that Jacob Zuma is going through, because he understands that the so-called albino elite, all right, are the minority, and the world's population is majority of black woolly-haired people. So in here, you can pause the video, like I said, and copy out the link, or just type up Jacob Zuma and go read on his Wikipedia page. It will say here that Zuma led the ANC to victory. That means ANC, the African National Congress in South Africa, to victory in the 2009 general election and was elected president of South Africa. He was re-elected as ANC leader at the ANC conference in Mangwang on 18 December 2012, defeating challenger Galema Motlanthe by a large majority, and remained president of South Africa after the 2014 general election, although his party suffered a decline in support, partly due to growing dissatisfaction with Zuma as president. Now, who will be responsible for raising, agents in South Africa to make Zuma have difficulty? It's the albino elite in the Vatican. Why? Because Zuma called them out on everything. He made them understand that you guys are a bunch of liars. We know who we are, and that Africa has always been the civilization that has always run this world. So you have to understand the mind game that's going on here. We keep on reading. It says, Zuma has faced significant legal challenges before and during his presidency. He was charged with rape in 2005, but was acquitted. He has fought a long legal battle over allegations of racketeering and corruption resulting from his financial advisor Shabir Sheikh's conviction for corruption and fraud. On April 6, 2009, the National Prosecuting Authority dropped the charges against Zuma, citing political interference, although the decision was successfully challenged by opposition parties. And as of February 2018, the charges were before the NPA for reconsideration. So Zuma has gone through a lot. You probably heard of maybe Zuma through one of these comedians. I'm forgetting his name, the name of the comedian, but he's from South Africa too. Talk about him all the time because Zuma realized, all right, he woke up from being an agent into understanding who he really was. That the civilizations that has always led the world has always been African. And that is the reason for downgrading Africa and making it look very small, because it's a mind game to control the majority of the world's population into thinking themselves as nobodies. Because when you think of yourself as nobody, you can never aspire to be somebody. That is why history is very, very important. Without a resume, you can't get hired for a job, because you cannot be given that job because you're a nobody. So anybody that writes your history writes your future. So that's why Africans are downgraded. They are made to feel like they are nobodies, and everybody black in the world is suffering because of that. Because all civilizations who have led this world has always been African. That's why all the albino elite organizations are in Africa, because they are trying to check Africans from realizing their history. They are trying to check black people for realizing their true history. So every way through diseases, AIDS in Africa, to decimate the population any way they can, and false histories, and they keep telling Africans that they don't have anything, that they are poor, they are broke, and that it's only the elite, the white albino elite, that can help them to be who they are. That is what is being told to every African and every black person day and at night. Why? Because they do not want you to realize who you truly are. So that's the mind game right here. The mind game to make a superior people believe that they are minority. It's like a hyena talking to an elephant. A hyena is a small dog that lives and resides somewhere in Africa, and an elephant is a very large animal. A hyena cannot kill an elephant because the elephant has more power, and with one kick it would kill the hyena. So what does the hyena do? The hyena talks to the elephant and starts telling him mind games. Starts telling him, you're so small. You're growing small every day. And with every lie he tells, he takes a chunk, a bite from the elephant's body. With every lie, until he keeps biting the elephant and taking chunks and chunks and chunks until the elephant dies. That is what the albino elite is doing to the majority of the world's population, taking chunks every day with every story they tell you to make you believe that you are the minority. Because in order for them to be superior and rule the population and rule the world and take leadership away from the civilizations that has always led it, they have to make them believe in lies, and that they are the minority. That's the whole story here. So that's the reason why there was a lot of wars during from the 1861 right here, starting with the American Civil War down until the Second World War. It was a changing of the baton from the old woolly head Vatican to the new albino Vatican, whose lineages all come from Genghis Khan and his generals. So that's the story that we wanted to share with you on the Real Presence part number 3. I hope you guys learned something. And like we've said, most of this information is in our book. We're not just trying to sell you a book. We're trying to put real history in your hands so you can understand your world and understand what's going on. So the information is on the screen. Send us an email or text us if you don't get a response, and save for the book. If you've bought something before, if you've been looking for truth in general and you can afford to buy a TV, you've bought a car, you can afford to buy a book. The price is not of our own doing. Go around and ask questions. Ask how much is it going to take for you to get a 934 pages of a book in color. Then you can come back and question us and see if we're telling you the truth or not. The book is 934 pages because we tried to compact all the information that we could so you could understand your world. We didn't just make it 934 pages because we wanted to. The book was not even 934 pages. It was more. It was 3 times those amount of pages for all the information that we wanted to get. But we had to put in a summary, and the summary is still very good. So with that, I hope you guys learned something. Subscribe to the channel, all right? And subscribe to the second channel, Tricks of the S-Tray, too, in case this one goes down. We can have some way to reach you until we get our website, which we're working on, which is going to be loaded so you guys can have a perfect understanding of the world. And I leave you with these words, as we always say: look with your eyes, but see with your brains. And I'll talk with you guys later.